Good morning. This is Deborah Matthews, Vicar of Revd, with my thought for today. Over the last 3 weeks, we have been reading the resurrection accounts in the Gospels and thinking about how the disciples reacted to hearing the news that Jesus had risen from the dead. To begin with, they reacted in pretty much the same way as I guess we would have done, in that it was outside their realm of experience. And so they wanted to see Jesus for themselves before they believed the stories that they were hearing about him. The women, who despite being afraid to tell the other disciples what they had seen, in case they were not believed, or in case they were even ridiculed, must have shared that news in the end, that Jesus was alive, because by the evening of that day, the disciples were together discussing what they had heard. But it's interesting that to begin with, some disciples didn't initially recognize Jesus. Mary thought that he was a gardener, and then the disciples on the road to Emmaus referred to him as a stranger. Now, was that because they were not expecting to see him, or because he looked significantly different? I have a real impediment in terms of recognising people, especially if I'm not expecting to see them or if I'm meeting them in a different context. So I don't find it that difficult to believe the accounts of disciples not knowing that they were talking to Jesus. I guess I would be frantically trying to place the person in the correct context and recall the information that I needed to carry on a conversation and be able to make an appropriate response. And my panic would be even more heightened if I was distressed or sad or worried in some way. The disciples were shocked and distraught about what had happened to Jesus. They probably felt a sense of guilt about their own lack of support for him, and Peter in particular, after he had denied that he even knew Jesus, must have felt this regret deep within his very heavy heart. In the Gospel reading set for today from Luke's Gospel, the disciples were sat discussing everything that they had heard with each other. And it could have been that there were lots of loud conversations going on all at once as they were sharing the news of who had said what to them. And then something changed, and suddenly they were no longer alone. Jesus was there with them. Perhaps it went quiet. The disciples thought that they must be seeing a ghost. But Jesus greeted them with the familiar words, "Peace be with you." Then he asked them why they were frightened. Why were they doubting when he, their teacher, was there with them? Jesus was physically present before them and showed them the wounds on his hands and his feet, and then he ate with them. And the disciples could see that there was a physical dimension to the resurrection. Today we continue to recite the line in the Apostles' Creed which acknowledges this: I believe in the resurrection of the body. And when we say this, we are not just affirming our faith in the resurrection of Jesus, but we are affirming that we are both soul and body, and that is part of our humanity. And it is our whole selves, not just our spirits and souls, that are renewed in him. Towards the end of the Gospel of St. John, Thomas, who had refused to believe the other disciples' testimony before he saw Jesus for himself, finally confessed Jesus as my Lord and my God. And so Jesus asked him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe." As disciples of Jesus today, we are often challenged and struggle with our faith, just as the disciples did on that first night. And we, like Thomas, may like some proof, but we only have faith. But with faith, however tiny, we come to believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and through believing, we find life in his name. May the blessing of God be with you this Easter time.